So we have a component with a form. Let's make the form actually do stuff. So first step, we need to make this a controlled component, right? So that we store whatever we type in there in state. We can handle that. Doesn't sound so bad. So we'll make a place for it. State equals email. That's the thing we're typing in. I'll just initialize that as an empty string.
So when can we do that outside the constructor?
Anytime, as long as that's the only thing you need to do inside the constructor. But if you need a constructor for some other reason, so here's an example. If you wanted to set its initial state by calling some other method or something, you have to do that from inside a constructor. And I've had situations like that. Or if you wanted to base it on a prop or something, yeah. We need to do that too. First, that's when we submit. Right now, I'm just worried about keeping track of the email as we type, like as we press in each individual key. So just like we did in message form. So message form, we kept the body here, and then we handled change and set that every time we typed. And then we also called add message, which came from the other component, right? So to actually sign in, yes, we'll need to update state in app. But just to keep track of what we're typing, that'll be right there in sign in. So anytime you're dealing with a form in React and you want to do it this way, which I recommend most of the time, you'll actually have state on whatever component has the form in it. Exactly. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Or anytime you paste anything, it's unlike on key press, that would work too. Anytime the value of that thing changes, it's going to call handle change. Which again, we got that whole idea out of, again, the React docs under forms. Told us all about controlled forms with this handle change method. So we're going to do the same thing. Handle change. It's again an arrow function. That's just going to set state. Just update state every time that thing changes. So it'll update email and set it to whatever the event target value is. So to make that actually work, our input needs to have value equals this.state.email. And so far what that will do is make this not work, right? Can't even type anything anymore. And then we need onChange equals this.handleChange. So now we can type, and if we look in our dev tools, all right, every time we type anything, it changes that email on state. So same thing we did before. But now we also want to do something when we submit. We want to update the signed in user in app.js. So instead of starting with a value there, we'll change app.js so that it starts as an empty object. When we're not signed in, this.state.user is an empty object. Still an object. I'm not going to set it to null, but I'll set it to an empty object. So if I want to change state in the app component, I need to do that from inside the app component, right? It's the only one that's allowed to change its own state. So we have to write the method that does that here in app, and then we'll call it from the other by passing it as a prop, right? So I'll call it handle auth. It'll take a user as an argument. I suppose. And it's going to do this.setState user in curly braces, which we know is shorthand for user:user. but we can just type user. That's all it needs to do. If we want to call that from sign in, we have to pass it down to sign in as a prop, right? So here's sign in, handle auth equals what? I want someone, preferably not the two that did this part, to answer. What do I type here? This dot handle auth, right? So this method from app.js, we're passing into signin.js as a prop. And this is an actual class, so we're not doing that destructuring thing. It's not being passed as an argument. It's actually being assigned as this.props. So we're going to call this from handle submit, right? So let's make handle submit. It'll also get an event as an argument. We'll prevent default as always on a form submission. So here's the form. On submit equals this dot handle submit. And we'll call this dot props dot handle auth. And we'll pass it a user object. We want a UID. Ultimately, we'll get this from some sort of third-party service. For right now, I'll just set it to something. I'll put the email in there just to make it unique, and then I'll just put some garbage. The garbage will be the same for every user, but this is temporary anyway. So then email is actually this.state.email. And for right now, for lack of a better idea, display name's the other thing it expects. Let's set that to this.state.email too. We'll just make the email the display name.